Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and today is another episode of the SL Show. First up, we're going to talk about some of the games from last night, including the Lakers revealing what will be their biggest weakness throughout this season. We're also going to check in on the Carmelo Anthony return tour. And then last up is going to be our headline of the day with some really interesting details about a proposed midseason tournament in the NBA. So first up, let's talk about last night. And the first game I want to talk about is actually a game that happened in the afternoon for me yesterday, and that was Lakers Mavs. And I was really excited for this game because the first time that these two teams played was, in my opinion, the best game of the year. The matchup between Luka Doncic and LeBron James, the supporting cast of those two teams, and how well they're both playing at this point. The Lakers had the best record in the league going into the game. The Mavs were, and continue to be a team that's playing extremely well and are a bit of a surprise in terms of how well they're playing and look to be two of the better teams in the Western Conference, potentially if Luka can maintain this level of play. So I was really excited going into the game, but really I came away thinking that the biggest weakness for this Lakers team is kind of something that we saw coming, and that's just a lack of shooting at the moment. Now, I talked about this a little bit in the past, right? Because even though the Lakers were playing well, they were winning a ton of games, their schedule was certainly a little bit suspect, and even though they were playing well and winning, they were in the bottom 10 in the league in both three-point attempts as well as percentage, and that was one of the biggest reasons that they lost yesterday to the Mavericks. They made 10 less threes than the Mavs, which is just a ton to try and overcome in a game that they end up losing by 14 points. And what a lot of people are going to take away from this is the Mavs hanging around in the first half, even though Luka wasn't playing well, and then he had a big third quarter, and that ended up being the difference in the game. But overall, when you look at the statistics, the Lakers just aren't a good enough shooting team right now to contend against some of the better teams in the West if they're not at the top of their game in the other aspects of the game. Because on most nights in the NBA, the Lakers are going to have two of the best players on the floor, they're going to outscore their opponent in the paint, and they're probably going to out-rebound them as well. But the great equalizer over the last 5 or so years in the NBA has been the three-point shot, and that is something that this team continues to lag behind in. Now, it's not the end of the world, it's just one game, and they certainly can improve as a shooting team, but personnel-wise, it just doesn't appear as though they have as many quality shooters as most good teams do around the league, and this is going to be something to continue to monitor for them. Now, having said that, I do think that their defense still looks really good and should continue to hold up even when they're playing against better competition. I wasn't all that confident in that coming into the season, but now having watched them for 20 or so games and against the Mavs yesterday, obviously they gave up 114 points, but strategically and from a schematic standpoint, from a personnel standpoint, their defense should be able to hold up. I just don't know if the shooting will. So that to me is definitely their biggest weakness, despite the fact they're obviously only lost 3 games through 20 so far, and they're still a very good team. The next game I want to talk about is the San Antonio Spurs getting pummeled by the Detroit Pistons. And literally in my notes it says, holy crap, the Spurs suck. They're 3-12 in their last 15 games. They're 27th in the league in defensive rating. And every single time these kinds of things happen, it becomes more and more clear that this team just isn't very good, and I'm struggling to see a point in which it's going to turn around. I keep waiting on it. I keep waiting on a 3-game win streak, a 4-game win streak, a 5-game win streak, and it's just not happening for them right now. Even games that they typically are blowing teams out of the water. I remember watching them play the Knicks, I think it was last week, and thinking, okay, this will be a nice game to turn things around, and they struggled throughout that entire game to put away even the Knicks, and it doesn't even look like the Spurs. I mean, defensively, they're a mess. Some of the players you would hope to have stepped up this year, guys like DeJounte Murray returning from injury, Derek White, who had a good postseason, those guys have mostly been disappointments. Maybe Murray will pick it up later in the year once he gets a little bit more healthy. But again, the offense isn't the issue. They're 12th in offensive rating. That's good enough for them to at least be in the playoff picture in the Western Conference. And the way that the 8th seed is working currently in the West, they're only like 3.5 games out. So it's not like they're all the way at the bottom, but they've got to find some kind of answers here. Like, I personally can't recall a time ever over this 20-year stretch since Tim Duncan got to the Spurs that they went 3-12 over a 15-game stretch. And like I said, I feel like they're going to be able to figure it out at some point and at least be an average defensive team. But right now, maybe it's just an issue of personnel, and this isn't typically a team that's going to make midseason moves to bolster their roster to change things up, but maybe they need to take a look at some of those things because it's not looking very good right now. And then the last game I want to talk about from yesterday is the Toronto Raptors absolutely destroying the Utah Jazz. They were up by 40 at halftime. They ended up winning the game by a significant margin, but it's not so much about that game specifically. I just think we need to give Nick Nurse some Coach of the Year props. And in my opinion, he should be coach of the year right now, even though the Raptors don't have the best record in the league like the Lakers do. I just want to give him coach of the year based off the job that he's doing and how well this team is playing, despite the fact that they lost Kawhi Leonard. They had every excuse to just be like a couple games over 500 team this season. They lost Kawhi Leonard. Kyle Lowry got hurt early in the season. There were going to be a ton of guys that were going to have to step up. And now Pascal Siakam looks like an MVP candidate. He's averaging almost 30 points a game. It's incredible, his improvement over last year. And if we're going strictly by the definition of most improved player, he would be in the running. There's no way he's going to win it a second time, but still. And then Van Vliet has been outstanding even without Kyle Lowry, who's someone that typically he's played a good amount with, and they've kind of balanced each other out. Even without Kyle Lowry, he has been a 20-point per game scorer for this team, and it's just incredible to see them continue to improve and just continue to exceed expectations, even given the fact they're in the Eastern Conference, which isn't as great on the back half. It's still just, there's nothing to compare this to. A team winning a championship, the guy that won Finals MVP leaving that off season, and then the team, that alone has no precedent, but then the team continuing to play well and continuing to play themselves into conversation for making the conference finals. It's just an incredible job by Nick Nurse and that coaching staff and those players to continue to improve and continue to buy in. And they're a team that I would be very afraid of if I was a fan of one of the other top teams in the Eastern Conference, because it seems like they're just going to find ways to win throughout this entire season, and that could continue to be the case in the postseason. Moving on now, let's talk about the Carmelo Anthony comeback tour. And I only made one video about this, or talked about it once in an SL show, and basically the takeaway was, give it some time, right? Like, it was an outstanding debut, but he did some things that it looked like could be sustainable moving forward. As long as he can make shots, rebound, and defend a little bit, he should be useful. And now that we've had some time, he's played 6 games with the team, this is a success so far. I mean, they lost their first 3 games, but they've won 3 in a row since, and Melo's averaged over 22 points per game in those 3 wins. And on the court, when you're watching, it looks like he's a real legit guy for this team. Now, granted, they shouldn't have to be relying on him this much. He shouldn't need to be a 20-point per game guy. He shouldn't be shooting the ball 20 times a game, but that's kind of where the Trailblazers are at right now as a team, specifically on the wings, and Melo's going to continue to be a 25 to 30 minute per game player for them until they figure out some other kind of solution, and if one never arises, then maybe this is just what Melo's going to be like the rest of the way. And the other significant part of this is, even if this doesn't turn around for Portland and they don't end up making the playoffs, I think Melo's proven that in the right situation, he can still be a solid NBA player, and as he said, I believe it was last week, basically came out and said, this isn't going to be some kind of farewell tour for me. I want to continue to play. If he keeps playing like this, he's going to get another opportunity somewhere. So those are all good things for Melo, and I do think there's a possibility that Portland could start to turn this thing around. They're really only 2 games out of the 8th seed in the loss column because they played more games than, I believe, the Suns, who are at 8 right now. So they have a chance to turn this thing around, and if they do, and they do get out of just kind of rough patch that they've been in, I think Carmelo Anthony would deserve a lot of the credit for that. So that's just kind of our quick peek in on the Carmelo Anthony comeback tour, which I'm sure we'll continue to come back to throughout the year. And the last up is something that actually happened right before I was about to start recording, and that is Mark Stein sent out a tweet talking about the potential midseason tournament for the NBA moving forward. I think it would only start in like 2021-22 season, and this was off the back of some reports last week and the week before talking about how the NBA was thinking about changing the scheduling around, decreasing the number of games, reseeding teams once they get to the conference finals, regardless of conference. Some really interesting ideas, but then one kind of out of nowhere one, and that was like a mid-season tournament, kind of like they have in soccer, and I didn't fully understand the point of it, right? Like I like some of the other ideas. They were also going to have play-in games for the postseason, but I didn't fully understand the idea that this midseason tournament was going to mean anything, right? Like, if we're trying to shorten the season, why would we add this other thing that teams would play in the middle of the year, seemingly without any incentive to win it? And wouldn't it be kind of embarrassing if they went forward with that plan and then nobody ended up playing their best players in the tournament because they want to rest them, right? So I thought that was kind of a strange inclusion in the initial plan, but Mark Stein now is saying that it's a possibility. It's not confirmed or anything, but one of the ideas they're throwing around is the winner of that tournament getting an extra first-round pick as a reward for winning the tournament. And that would be incredibly interesting. And as soon as I read it, I was suddenly really invested in this idea. And of course, immediately people started complaining about it, saying that, oh, these veterans are going to be playing in this tournament to earn a first round pick that's going to end up taking their job or taking their spot in the rotation. And then other people were saying, oh, that's just going to make the good teams even better. Great. But taking away trying to be so negative and cynical about it, I think this would be awesome. Like, there would be, personally for me, like, that would be a lot of incentive for my team, depending on where the pick is. I mean, if it's the last pick in the first round, then, I mean, that doesn't really say too much to me about, how much it would mean to win the tournament. But depending on where the pick is, that would be incredibly valuable from a trade aspect, from getting another young player, there'd be so much more to this tournament. It'd be so much more meaningful if this was the case. And again, this is only rumors. The tournament and the schedule changes in general are only proposed things. And then the first round pick is just something they're kind of throwing around as a possible reward. But I mean, you guys can let me know what you think in the comment section. But personally, I think it would be an awesome idea. I have no issue with a team that is good getting another first round pick. Honestly, I feel like there probably should be some other kind of incentive as well, because I think there are some teams that would look at it and be like, we're not that invested in getting this first round pick. But if it was me and I was in charge of a franchise, I would be trying to get that first round pick. So it would be so valuable. And it would just be really awesome to see, like, what if a team won that first round pick and then the guy they ended up picking with it ends up becoming an all-star, like a foundational player for their team. I think it's a really awesome idea and something I just want to talk about a little bit here at the end of today's show. But that is going to be the end of today's episode, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.